How's it going, guys? Welcome to Audio Addiction. Welcome to, I think it is episode 11 of Backstage Press. We have Fly on the Call podcast with us, and he can say his name and what he does and all that good stuff.
So my name is Scott Fugger, and mainly what I've been focusing on lately is a podcast called Fly on the Call. The tagline for that is candid conversations on music, because that's really what I'm aiming to do, is just talk to bands and have good conversations with them that leads to interesting stuff. So yeah, that's been the main focus. I also write for The Alternative. I occasionally do a little bit of PR here and there, and yeah, just generally love and want to spread the word of music.
There we go. Well, we have to start off the episode with Scott and I, for like the longest time, didn't even know each other, I think. And then we had met at Launch Conference because of shout-outs to the Great Heights Band. I think I don't know if it was I emailed Neil or somehow I got in contact with you. I don't know if you sent me an email or vice versa. And all I remember was like, yo, are you going to this like music conference? And you're like, yeah, well, Great Heights Band's playing it, so I'll be there. And I was like, sick. So then we wind up hanging out, talking for like that weekend. And we've, remained in contact for this. And I was just like, I know Scott's doing this podcast thing, so I was like, gotta get him on to talk about that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Was that pretty accurate? Would you say, Scott? Or
Yeah, at the time I was doing work on their PR for the second follow-up they saw, and I think maybe I saw you post on like a Facebook group or something just about your YouTube channel, and I checked it out and thought it was a good fit, and you ended up interviewing them and reviewing the album, and yeah, it was rad to hang out with you and actually meet you in person, since that happens like so infrequently in the music industry, I feel like.
Yeah, because we were talking about that. Like I was saying, it's just so strange when you like know people and you're like, oh, we talk pretty frequently, like talk about like life stuff or whatever, and then we never meet. And that's like one of the strangest anomalies about doing like this sort of thing, is like having friends in other countries and other states and stuff, and that you'll never meet them. I mean, I'm not gonna say never. There's a very good chance that you won't. And so it's always cool to meet people. But as you had mentioned before, you had been doing a lot of different things like PR, marketing, all that sort of stuff, doing press. But how did you kind of start out doing this whole music thing? Like, I imagine you're an avid music listener prior to doing all of those things, but when was the point where you were like, I want to try to get into the industry somehow? Like, how do I do it? Am I just gonna just wing it, just ask as many people as I can? Like, I'm curious what your story was starting out.
Yeah, so I guess I've like you said, I've always been a big fan of music for sure. And then last year or so of high school, kind of figuring out what I want to do with the rest of my life, I ended up going to one school for a semester. Then it wasn't the right fit, so I ended up at community college for like a year and a half, and then when it finally came to really decide like a major, I was like, well, music is kind of the only thing I'm super passionate about, so let's go for that. And so I went to University of New Haven. They have a music industry program, which is, I'm sure most people who are interested in that kind of stuff have heard good and bad about music as far as college goes. So it was definitely, the way I ended up like actually involved in music officially was, for 2 internships that I had to do. One of them, I had been working with the school's record label, which was an interesting experience for sure. And so there's this band, the Foresters, that had reached out to them, and we got pretty far in the process of potentially getting them signed, and ended up falling through. So I, reached out and I was like, I think this music is really good, and I would like to help promote it. And I turned that into like an independent internship where I pretty much just worked directly with the band and figured out where my skills could best be used. And so pretty much fell into naturally kind of the role of PR. Taught myself a lot of stuff that summer, and then that fall I turned that into an internship at Big Picture Media, who at the time were doing press for Silverstein and the Wonders, who are literally my 2 favorite bands. So it was kind of the dream for sure. And then You know, I think the writing came in when the website Modern Vinyl had been looking for.
Ah, okay.
Um, they were looking for staff writers, and it was kind of I'd written a couple like album reviews for my school newspaper in high school, but didn't really get the bug for it or anything. But I kind of had this idea when I applied for Modern Vinyl. It was with an article that kind of I compared the mentality of people who collect vinyl with Pokemon masters.
Sure.
And that piece just kind of like spilled out of me and, came super quickly. And it was like the first time that I kind of thought about that as, a potential. So I
Hmm.
kind of, reached out to a couple of sites, ended up writing for 36 Vultures for a while. I wrote for Funeral Sounds for a while and then moved over to the alternative. And, once uh, I've, the last year or so kind of was finding it a little bit harder to, get the inspiration to actually write. Like I was still conducting interviews and really enjoying
Sure.
doing
Yeah.
that, but, dragging my feet as far as getting it transcribed and then written up into an article. And, so the podcast was just kind of naturally born out of that, wanting to still, find ways to interact with the music that I love and promote the music that I love and just find a more sustainable way for me at the moment to do it.
Yeah, no, I feel like there's obviously I didn't know anything about that because Scott and I have like been friends, but I feel like I only know surface level Scott and not like more deep knowledge Scott. But I felt like with the podcast, and I was just like when you had originally posted about it, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like I was like, because I had when audio addiction was starting out, I was like, that was what we were doing, and then I kind of jumped ship, which now looking at it, it's like everybody does podcasts. So I was just like, I should have just continued with it, and that would have been great. But hindsight's 2020. But I felt like with the podcast, I was like, okay, well, like obviously, like the whole like Great Heights thing had like passed and moved on, and I was just like, oh, I should still keep in contact with Scott. I was like, I'm sure they're still good friends and all that stuff. So I was like, it's no bad blood or anything. So I was just like, oh, I should just message Scott and see if he'd be like willing to come on and like talk about the podcast and all that stuff. Because does it feel to you as like the evolution, like the next step for you to be like, you know what, like this is what I want to do. Like I want to have like the podcast and all that stuff. And you've had some like really great people on so far. So, um, was that always the alternative, or did you maybe have like another idea, or were you like dead set on the whole podcast thing?
I mean, I feel like my whole kind of like journey through the quote unquote industry side of music is me just kind of going with the flow, seeing where it takes me. But yeah, I mean, definitely the podcast was, I am very interested in podcasts, so that was definitely, a plus. And then, it's just as a way to really kind of speed up the process and allow me to talk to and promote even more people. I have a 30 to hour minute or 30 to an hour like interview, and then I'll do a quick edit through. I don't get too deep into the mud as far as editing, and then I'll throw in a quick intro, throw a quick paragraph together for the show notes and get it up. So it's been a really nice way to have force myself into that consistency in a way too, for sure.
That's awesome. And obviously, you had mentioned the Wonder Years. So, how is interviewing Soupy? I'm sure it must have been like an absolute. I'm sure you've talked to him too, obviously. But like, how was having him on the podcast and obviously going through that? Because I was listening to it and I was just like, he just sounds hyped about it. So I was like,
Oh
dude,
yeah.
I was hyped for you because I was just like, I've had those moments where I've like interviewed people and I've been so like, I'm like so about that band. So how did that come to be? Like I assume it had some sort of connection to Big Picture Media, but how did you like go about hitting him up and you're like, hey, would you want to come on this podcast, all this sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, they're actually with No Earbuds now with Jamie Coletta as their
Correct.
press.
Yeah.
But so I've been, I mean, basically since I've been writing about music, they've been the interview that I've been trying to get. So I was really excited when it finally came through. It was, I don't know, like I almost feel like I don't know, I don't have any like big goals as far as interviews now. Like I have to kind of, reassess and figure out who my next big one is that I want. Because I mean, for episode 10 of the podcast, I talked to Shane Told of Silverstein
Oh,
about,
what?
yeah, about that.
That's
It was my
crazy.
third time interviewing him, but I talked to him for an hour and a half about A Shipwreck in the Sand, which is my favorite album.
That's
So
great. Well,
that was
I gotta
insane.
interject. That is one of the best Silverstein records. Shout out to my cousin. I'm sure you've seen it. Is that photo with like all of the Silverstein albums, and they are like, rate which ones are your like top three Silverstein records. And I think I picked. I'm almost positive it was three. I'll pull it up because I Instagram like DM'd him, and I was just like, which ones would you choose? So but I was like, that was very cool. So like, how obviously you had interviewed him three times, so like, how was that experience interviewing him and talking about like Shipwreck in the Sand? And did he feel like, I guess, like nostalgia towards it, because I feel like that one's the next biggerish one that's coming up that I feel like a lot of people love. Like that one is one of my personal favorites. So did he kind of hint at maybe like doing a anniversary tour like they've been doing with like the past couple records?
Yeah, I mean, so it was really awesome. I think it worked in my benefit. He was on a car ride from Toronto back to Detroit or wherever he lives.
Oh
So,
wow, okay.
so I had him for, I think he was just kind of happy to have the company on the ride. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of right around the time that because it was, you know, the album came out in March of 2009, but the podcast didn't start until October. So I was talking to him like October, November, a little past the 10 years, and they had announced the 20-year tour already. So he was kind of saying, they'll try to play as much from there as he could. But didn't seem like they were planning a 10-year, or well, it'd be more than a 10-year now, I guess, potentially a 15-year up in
Oh
2024.
yeah. Well, now I'll be looking forward to it. Hopefully they do that, because that would be very awesome. But getting back to the question I asked you, I think the picks that I picked were 2, 3, and 4. So I think it was Shipwreck in the Sand, Arrivals and Departure, and then Discovering the Waterfront. I felt like
I'm surprised about Arrivals.
Yeah,
That's typically.
I think because for me, like, that was that was the record I found out about Silverstein,
Okay,
and
yeah.
then Shipwreck in the Sand was just a great follow up, and then I went back to go listening to Discovering the Waterfront. So for me, that was really cool. And then my honorable mention, because I feel like you can't just pick three. I would have to say 7 is my honorable mention. I felt like that one is still it was very close, but I knew I had to pick 7 because it's just such an underrated record. And I think you picked, what was your choices on those records?
Yeah, so I went for Shipwreck, and then This Is How the Wind Shifts,
Correct.
and then
Yeah.
I'm Alive and Everything I Touch. I feel like, obviously Discovering the Waterfront and When Broken Easily Fixed are like classics, and even a couple of years ago I probably would have been like, no, those are the best ones, but I really do just, I mean, well, Shipwreck has always been my favorite since
Yeah,
it came
same.
out, because that was the one that I pretty much discovered them on. It was like the first one that came out after I knew them. But yeah, I find myself revisiting like that mid-career Silverstein more often, um, just with, I guess, a little bit of the more polished sound, I guess.
No, I absolutely feel you on that, because, like I said, I like kind of like early-ish, like, middle Silverstein. And I feel like they've got such a, great, you can't. I don't think anybody can deny their discography as a band. Like, I feel like they've always been able to reinvent their sound, but also like kind of like do different things. Especially like with the new record, I felt like that one was the most diverse of any of the records that they've done previously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even like I kind of scoffed at you saying Arrivals and Departures, so that's like, the fan least favorite typically. But even when I go back and revisit that, like every single song on it is good. It's just like the album as a whole doesn't, fit together as well as some of the other ones do for me.
No, I absolutely feel that, and I know a lot of people aren't gonna say that one. So I just feel like for me, I might have the nostalgia glasses on for it. If I was picking it more so like just like writing and stuff like that, I feel like it might be a little bit different. I'd still feel like Shipwreck would definitely still be in that
Yeah.
roster, but I maybe might have chosen differently for that. But what obviously you had gotten two very big, artists, being Silverstein in the Wonder Years, but if there was anybody else, like a dream person you'd want to have on in the future, who would you want to have on the podcast?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm really kind of like in that process of trying to plan like, another stage of, the bigger ones that I want. I'm not really sure. I mean, like I'm super content with like, getting bands as they're on the rise up and being able to talk to them about like, the
Sure.
album that's going to end up being really big rather than the one that, is after they're already big.
Sure.
So I'm like super happy filling that niche for now. I mean, it'd be awesome getting like Lizzo on there at some point, but
Who knows? It may, I feel like with anything, if you put it out in the universe, there's a probably pretty good chance it will happen. But what was one, like if my viewers to go check out your stuff, what would be one podcast episode that you would recommend to my fans? Like, be like, you know what, this is the episode that I feel like I'd want you to check out.
I don't know. I feel like two of them that stand out for me would be Glass Beach and Origami Angel,
Oh,
just because those were bands that really kind of came out of nowhere for me last year, and that I kind of like got very quickly obsessed with, and I feel like those were very open interviews, and just like they have that excitement that I try to have about every interview.
that's awesome. I have checked out most of them. I don't know if I checked out those two, but I'll have to go now, listen to them. Maybe when I'm driving into work, I'll have to go give them a listen. But as you know, Scott, I like to ask some band questions, or maybe not. I do like to ask some band questions in here. So, who have you been jamming recently? What's on the Spotify? What's been listened to lately?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been actually going through a random jam band phase for some reason.
Interesting.
Like I have always had the right mentality for like jam bands just because of the way that like, people obsess over like every single show. Like I am very much have that like collector mentality and stuff. Um,
Gotcha.
but it never really clicked until like last December. I heard someone compare like Fish to jazz rather than rock music, and I don't even like jazz, but for some reason that like change in my mindset, made it click for me. So I've been listening to like a crap ton of Fish and the Grateful Dead, just because they're kind of like the classics. It's
Classics,
been a
yeah.
lot to discover, and it's also really nice to be able to put on one of their shows, and then by the time it's over, you're like halfway through the day because they play for 2.5 to 3 hours. Um, but I mean, other than that, I've been listening to a lot of the new Spanish love songs records.
That's
That's
great.
probably like
Yeah.
my favorite of the year, and I had Dylan on the pod, and he was really awesome. Um, Honestly, most of the stuff I'm playing is the stuff that I'm interviewing for the pod because it's kind of that, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do I love this band and that's why I want to interview them, or did I interview them and then fall in love with them? But all that, Gray Matter just put out a really good album. This band Chowsen they're from Connecticut too, and they put out like a really cool kind of like party punky album, like some 41
Interesting.
influences for sure.
Okay.
Lots of good stuff there. Yeah, I've just kind of try to discover whatever people are listening to and give it a check out if I can. And yeah.
You always have some interesting bands. I'll give you that. Like somehow, like I'm always surprised at how I find bands and stuff. So when anybody else does kind of a similar thing, like either a podcast or they do like YouTube or whatever, I'm always curious how they go about finding these artists and stuff. Whether it be just like a happenstance where they're like listening to Spotify radio and they're like, oh, this band came on, I had to go check them out, I had to go email them or whatever, or if it's just like, oh, I've known about this band for like forever, they've been underground, like now it's time to talk about them and hopefully get some like hype around it. So I'll have to go check those out because I feel like when you give the Scott approval, I feel like I gotta go give it a listen. But the next question, Scott, another fun one. If you were to compile a Scott Dream Tour lineup, who'd be on it?
Oh, that's pretty hard. I don't know. I feel like there's so many different ways I could go with that. Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel like not out of the possibility. The Wonder Years and Silverstein have toured together before. Seeing them on a bill would be awesome. if you throw in Pentimento, who I consistently
Ooh,
call as
yeah.
my third favorite band, I'd definitely be down for that. So I guess, Pie in the Sky, that would probably be a dream tour for sure. But I mean, I love so much music. I'm down with so many tours that happen.
I feel like that one's. I feel like that would be very cool. That would be very nostalgia. So I'm if I had to give the cosign, this would be the cosign move. But the next question, Scott, one of the ones that I feel like we can kind of bond over. You're a vinyl collector yourself, so what was your most recent vinyl pickup? And which one's your favorite? I know that's like picking your favorite child. I understand. I know the same feeling, but I figured I'd ask that since you're a vinyl collector.
Yeah, so the favorite is actually pretty easy, I think, because
Ooh, okay.
so I used to variant collect the Wonder Years. I've
Okay.
I've sold off a little bit of the collection. I keep it current with at least the most rare pressing of whatever new
Okay.
stuff comes out or the best looking. Kind of figure that out. But one of my favorite songs by them is a B-side from the Upsides called "Leaving House
Oh,
1130."
nice. Yeah.
And so that was originally offered. It came with the vinyl pre-order of the Upsides as a special clear 7-inch with a silk screen on it.
Oh, that's neat.
And there's a Friends Press version of that where the silk screen is actually a purple color rather than the gray. And the way it looks is amazing. And it was like one of the records that I was searching for forever, and then finally ended up getting a really good deal on it. So that I think is the easy one to point out as my favorite, just because of kind of like the story behind it and stuff as
Sure.
well, and the look of it for sure. And then as far as my most recent pickup, I think as far as buying new, it's probably the Origami Angel LP, which actually
Okay.
I just got. That was a pre-order from back in December or whatever, but I
Ooh.
just got the shipping confirmation for that today, which
Oh.
is awesome. And as far as used stuff, I actually got a couple variants that I've been wanting of some Pentimento records popped up on eBay from a seller, and I ended up getting them all for the starting bid and combined shipping. So that was a pretty nice little haul last week.
There we go. I feel like both of us are in a good boat. I feel like our bank accounts may not be in a good boat, but I just feel like based off of considering that we both still have like jobs and stuff, which shouts to unfortunately all the people that don't have jobs. I hope that you're able to find something when this all blows over. But yeah, I see a lot of people. I'm like on a Facebook group of like people selling their records and stuff, and it just hurts. Like I look at it and I'm like, I shouldn't do it. I know I shouldn't do it. I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I was like, I should just save my money. And then I'll see like one that I want that I haven't gotten, and they're like selling it, and I'm like, I can't do it. So I was like, maybe by the time this comes out, I might get what I'm looking for, but I don't want to jinx myself. I don't want to say I'm gonna get it and then not get it, because that would be very deceiving. But um, the next thing, Scott, I guess what would be some like advice you would have for somebody getting into the music industry, either whether it be they want to start like a podcast or they want to kind of go your route and do a bunch of like internships. What do you feel like you could, if you were talking to like younger Scott, what would you like, what type of advice would you offer him? Obviously, because your hindsight's 2020 now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've done my best to kind of like apply the general kind of the cliche advice of kind of like just go for it.
Yeah.
And I think I definitely like stand by that. Um, I mean, I really do try to do the thing where it's like the worst someone can say is no. So it's like,
True.
reach out for, the internship at Big Picture Media. I ended up getting an interview and ended up getting it. Reaching out to the alternative to write for them. They weren't necessarily specifically looking for writers when they were, but they said yeah. Or like, if I, didn't think I was big enough to land a Wonder Years interview and didn't ask, it never would have happened.
True.
So really just kind of like going for it is really my best advice. I mean, the first 3 or 4 episodes of my podcast were recorded as phone calls using my AirPods as the microphone, and they're just thrown up into Anchor, distributed for free
Yeah.
and stuff. And then as the process went on, I figured out I got, the USB mic. I figured out that Zoom records a lot better and stuff like that. So, really just kind of getting yourself started has been the biggest thing for me, and then figuring out how to improve upon it is what makes it fun down the road.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm always curious to see people's viewpoints just because I feel like we're kind of in the same boat because obviously you do a podcast. I'm kind of doing like essentially a podcast. If that, I feel like if I just cut the video out and I just put the audio up, I could do it. Um, but for me, it's like, I would have to back the sentiment of like, just go for it. Like every time I try to like get an interview or when I asked Scott, I was like, even though Scott and I are friends, I was like, I was like, he could say no, so I was just like, you got to keep it in the back of your head, so, but with all of, like, with all stuff going on, especially, more currently, if you just don't go for it, I feel like, you miss out on the opportunities you don't take. So like, you never know what people are going to say, what they're about, you might wind up, getting what you asked for. So I would totally back that as well. But the last thing, Scott, the most important thing, I'm going to give you the floor. Tell them about, Fly on the Call pod, what you got planned coming up. And what people can expect, like when they go check out your podcast, like what do you want them to take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, what I want you to take away from it is just kind of a deeper understanding of the artist. Whether it's me diving specifically into a lyric with them and getting to the bottom of that, or just talking generally about their process. I feel like the best interviews come when the person's genuinely curious, and
Yeah.
that's what I always try to be with bands. I make sure to make I ask the same last question every time, which is just for like a piece of advice. But other than that, they're all custom questions. As I continue to do more and more interviews, I feel like I'm getting better at just having it be a conversation rather than just like the prepared like bullet list questions and quick responses, quick answers. And hopefully, ideally, it'll be enough to where if you don't know the band, you'll check them out and
Sure.
hopefully really dig their music. I try to showcase as much of a variety as I can. I've gotten plenty of pop punk bands, plenty of heavier ones. I've gotten a couple country artists, some ska, a little bit of as much as I can get, and that's always a goal of mine. So yeah, just I feel like if you go in with an open mind, ready to learn something or hear something new, then that's what my goal is for sure. And yeah, as far as finding it, should be it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's on the Alternatives Mixcloud, which is mixcloud.com/the_alternative. If it's on a podcast player if it's not on a podcast player that you use, let me know and I'll try to get it on. At Fly on the Call Pod on all the socials. You can hit me up, flyonthecallpod@gmail.com. All that good stuff.
There we go. Well, go check out Scott's stuff, as if I haven't recommended it enough. Seriously, Scott's becoming one of my favorite interviewers, as I aspire to continue doing what I do with, whether it be this or, with bands and stuff. It's always interesting to see a different person's perspective, feel a little bit jealous sometimes, when you're like, oh, I got Silverstein and I'm like, your boy's out here trying to get Silverstein, but, no hate. I appreciate, it's very cool to see a different perspective, see how people, ask questions, how they kind of grow and stuff as interviewers. And like I said, I've been tuning in since like the first episode and I've kind of like missed a few here and there, so I have to scrub back and get a few more, but generally I've been trying to listen to a good majority of them, and from episode 1 to now, it's been such a cool like transition and growth and all that stuff. So I'll be leaving all the links in the description. Check out Fly on the Call podcast. You'll be able to find all the links. Follow him on social media. Make sure to go follow him on Spotify. Same with Apple Podcasts. I don't know what you do on that, so if you want to follow him on there too, you can do that. And I'll leave all of his social media links. Go give him a like. Go give him a follow on those things as well. And obviously, if you enjoy this interview, share, like, and subscribe if you are part of the music business industry of some sort, or you do any sort of music relation thing, podcast, stuff like that. There's always a link to my email address, or feel free to DM me on social media. We'll get it set up. And thanks, of course, to Scott for coming on and chatting tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for everyone for watching.